Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. We're always pleased to be with you, and we thank you for your continued listenership. Those of you who are listening us here on in Saginaw at what's the name of what's our station?
WSGW.
Thank you, WSGW. I'm like, seriously, like I remember Illinois, WJOL, Joliet, and yeah, it's right in my face. Thank you very much for making me look crazy. It's right by your mouth, Kareem. So we thank you guys for continually listening. And this is a place where bloopers are just a part of the regular conversation. But we're in the studio today with my two main guys. Now you guys are both my main men. Our producer, John B. in the place to be. John, what it is.
Hello, hello.
Hey, you see how we do these things? I said, John, what it is. And he came in with his hello, hello.
Yep.
We are giving you a cultural experience, even in our introduction. Mark, what's good, my man?
I don't have a call line. I gotta come on. I did that. Hey now.
Hey now. But we're here, and it's always a good time. You know, I was talking with some. I'm always interested in what people are thinking. For a long time, we were not getting any feedback. We were just kind of doing this show. But there have been a number of people that always kind of pop in and say some things. But I was talking to somebody.
Your mom.
No, that's our fan. But I was talking with someone that I didn't even know listened to the WSGW, and they said, "No, I listen to the Art Lewis show all the time." And they were like, "Yeah." And so we were able to catch your show one day. We were listening, like, "Isn't that Kareem on the radio?" And they started talking, and they were like, well, who are the two white guys with you? And I was like, "Oh, that's John. He's the producer, and the other guy is Mark." That Mark guy is hilarious. And I don't know, Mark, I don't know why, but people seem, however you're playing over the radio, they tend to catch your humor and find you to be a great addition. They love the way we play off of one another. And I think,
team.
Yeah,
Laurel
I think
and
so.
Hardy. Abbott and Costello.
So who is he, Curly?
Yeah, the Three Stooges. Slapstick humor.
But we're always glad to be here. We're going to get into our conversation today because I think that this is one. I know that it's very important to my heart and Martin. I know that this is something that you take really seriously. We're going to talk today about the power of mentorship. And I've had some amazing mentors in my life that have kind of really helped to steer this out of control locomotive in the right direction. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But before we do that, I want to talk about what's hot off the press. I am just blown away. I don't know if you guys have been watching what's been going on with Damar Hamlin. I know that we talked about it a little bit last week, and I brought up the idea or the question about his financial situation that could possibly be in peril. But I was pleased to know this never happens. Mark may be onto something. The greater part of human belief and human personality says that the Buffalo Bills are going to honor his contract in its entirety.
They had to.
Do you hear that silence?
See, now you're taking the other side of it. They had to, or else people would have come
I
after
think
them.
whether they wanted to or not, you had to.
Yeah.
Do you really
They may have
believe-
done it irrespective. Who knows? Probably, but I just think it would have been a public relations fiasco if you didn't do something special and unique. Now, the next guy that blows out his knee or his tendon, his Achilles, they're not going to. I mean, the thing here is you've set a precedent.
That's my thing.
So it's going to be a bit of a slippery slope. This is such a unique. I mean, the guy died on the field. So
let me ask this question.
What did the Steelers do with Stingley? I never followed up. The guy.
I don't know. Yeah.
It would be interesting to see if they took care of him financially.
What's interesting to me about this is I just started thinking, and we're not, aficionados in any area that we talk about. We just like to talk, right? But I was thinking about, is there a liability that the team might have or the NFL might have with him actually dying on the field and being resuscitated?
I've got to believe there's all sorts of waivers and everything like that. It's part of the players union negotiation.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, and it was interesting because the NFL Players Association was not a part of this conversation that took place. And so I was really surprised because we've seen other people that have died and this hasn't happened. But I think because this happened in live and in real time and the world was watching, that I agree with you, Mark, that they couldn't just brush this off, be like, oh, well, he's not playing. So
No.
I thought maybe they would give him his first year of 100 and whatever, 800 and whatever it was, and just kind of let it play out to see what would happen. But I am so glad that the greater good of humanity, as Mark might call it, has shown up. You know, John and I tend to think that people are not so kind and altruistic, but it's great to see the Buffalo Bills doing the great thing. So his 4-year contract of $3.6 million is going to be covered, and I think that's really exciting. It's great to see this kid, and I say kid, he's a young man. It's great to see this young man responding and now talking and
He's home. They flew him home, right?
did they finally? Because I know they were waiting for some things. So he's home now.
I think so. I think I saw that the other day.
Is not this the craziest thing? Like, what is, when you look at this, what do you think are going to be some of the things that people will take away from this?
No, I don't know.
I don't know.
Really, nothing.
Nothing?
I mean,
Yeah, I
there's
don't
nothing you
think-
can
So do you think
about
people
this.
would just be like, this is just a freak accident happened?
Yes.
And
Yes.
really, you don't
Yep.
think it's like,
How many points of contact in an NFL game have happened over the course of a season, never mind the last decade? And how many times do you have this kind of catastrophic
but the
event?
entire world was praying for this kid.
Sure.
Literally the next day, the
Yes.
day after it happened, we ran a story here where basically it had a doctor on there saying, hey, this is what happened, what I believe happened.
Right.
He wasn't connected with the case, but he's like, this is what I believe happened. It literally needs to be milliseconds. It needs to be the right firing of the right neurons in the right situation for this situation to
Something
happen.
like this has happened in baseball, I think, one time where a
He
guy
said
got
it's-
beamed in the chest.
He
I
said
think-
it's more common in baseball and hockey.
Yeah.
I think that people, we have a way of explaining away things that we don't understand, even when we can't even, verify or justify that. I would like to think that this was a great moment in time when we see the power that prayer has when the world comes together.
So now you're the optimist.
No. I just believe in the power of prayer. And the thing that I remember is that everyone was praying for this kid. So I don't care what they say. I
It's the
think
old
that
adage, crisis brings people together. 9/11. I mean, moments of crisis tend to bring people together.
Okay, so
they put all their differences aside.
I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
Mark. I'm glad you said that, because I get frustrated by this. I love the fact that we do that, but why does it have to be crisis in order for us to come together? Why can we not?
Because it puts things in perspective. You realize in a moment of crisis, in a moment of death, pandemic, people realize there's something bigger and more important. People are like, we still have the
So
little
we would
stones.
just be jerks to each other all of the other time. But
when they get lost in
now
the
it's
day-to-day,
time.
you get lost in the day-to-day hustle and bustle of life. And I mean, we still have those little stones that kids were painting and leaving by our driveway, like hope. It'll be better tomorrow. We've kept them. Yeah. So,
Well, okay. So hopefully that
see,
we'll
that's why I believe in people, Kareem.
okay.
Let me ask you something.
Yes.
The people you know and associate with, do you think they're good people?
The people that I know and I associate with, yes, because I
Let
only
me ask you,
associate
it's
with
like-
good people.
Right. What percentage of people do you run into? Do you think, well, that's just a bad person?
I don't take the time to think if that's a bad person.
Okay.
I guess, but if I were to look at it and say, look, how are people, genuinely? I tend to not think that people are.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think that the people that are good, I make a conscious intentional effort to keep them around, because I think that they are a rare breed.
Okay.
And so
Interesting.
yeah,
Because I think people who have evil intents are kind of the rare breed.
really.
So,
John, what do you think? John's over there
Well,
like
John's Lutheran. They think
okay.
everybody's bad.
Is that
Yeah.
is Lutheranism? Is that where like everyone's going to hell? I mean, because
Well, Lutheranism teaches original sin, and everybody is born in sin. And,
shaped in iniquity.
Most Christian religions teach.
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
well, that's kind of. I believe that outside of faith, which it's hard to get outside of faith, but my worldview is that everybody acts according to their own self-interest, which is more often than not evil. And in faith, I believe that apart from being part of the family of Christ, you cannot do anything good, because anything that you do that is quote unquote
Self-serving.
quote unquote good is self-serving, and it's original sin. That's basically.
And so, Mark, you think the absolute opposite of this?
Well, I just think, people who are like, I know people who claim to be atheists or agnostic or non-practicing Christians that do a lot of good things.
I don't think Christianity has anything to do with that, though. I think faith makes us conscious of that. But I mean, come on, how many acts of of murder and craziness were done under the realm of Christianity?
Oh yeah, a lot.
So, anyways, we're gonna go to better things. We're getting deep into this religious conversation, with theological conversation. We didn't mean to. I wanted to talk a little bit about Kevin McCarthy, because you said something, and as I was watching this whole thing play out, John, I was thinking about something that you said. As we were talking, I was like, is this guy ever going to get to the number of 216? I think is what he's shooting for, 217 initially or something like that.
I think so.
For the number of votes to become Speaker of the House. He wanted this thing bad. I don't think I'd want to govern in a place where I have to give away all of my power and leverage in order to do so. But you said, I'm wondering how long it's going to take before people just started voting present. Yeah, I remember you saying that. So did you guys watch any of this play out?
Zero interest
until vote 6.
Until vote 6, there were 15 votes.
Oh yeah.
Oh my! So
I had other stuff to do.
So zero interest, Mark?
Zero. It's just a joke.
Why, Mark? This is
because I just don't believe it's gridlock at this point. I don't take the vast majority of these people seriously. They're not serious politicians looking to accomplish something to make the country better. They're ideologues. They're looking back, frankly, for their own, a lot of them anyway. I shouldn't generalize too much, but a lot of the people that get most of the press, frankly, I think are thinking about their own image and power and, wealth gain.
And I wouldn't disagree with you in any way, shape, or form with what you said. However, as I was at home, and it was probably about 11 o'clock at night, I literally watched this thing. Was this Friday night that this happened? Yeah, Friday. I literally watched all day Friday, like watching this as I'm working and doing different things. And I was like, this is so funny. I've never seen this part of our government. I guess most people haven't, since it's been like 100 years or so since something like this has happened.
Is this the most ever? I think.
Is this, or I think it's gonna be like 149 years before you find something else that was longer. But I'm just so intrigued by how corny some of the things are that we create.
Oh yeah.
And I guess because we've allowed certain things to not be updated with the times. And so there's an archaic element to how our government operates. And it was interesting to see, first of all, the defectors. So I was wondering, like, when they, like 14 or 15 of these people had all defected, and then there was just like Bober and Gates that were still holding out. And then she started voting present, and he was kind of like the lone person. I thought it was so interesting that a fight almost broke out on the floor.
Right.
And I was like, are we that passionate about what we're doing? I think they were just mad and ready to go home.
Personal there, because they were talking about the committee this guy was on.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's just crazy when the politicians I take least seriously, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz.
They're far righter guys.
Yeah, and frankly, on the other side, they weren't involved in this fray, like AOC, the lady down in Detroit. These aren't serious politicians are getting all the press and wield all this power. It's just crazy to me.
What are you going to say?
According to history.house.gov, in 1855, 133 votes were taken to determine the Speaker of the House.
133 votes?
And it took 2 months.
Wow. So they had no Congress operating. It was a different time and place, obviously.
That is crazy. But I still found this interesting. I think whenever I learn something about how our government operates, and you get to see it, and this was going to lead to one of the other.
What do you think about the efficiency of it all?
I don't think it's very efficient.
Yeah. So this gets me. I was having a discussion with a friend. It's like, this is why I don't want the government taking over almost anything, because of how inefficient the government is.
Oh,
so that's like,
if you want
the last thing I want is
keep the
totally
government
different.
Here's a question: do you want the federal government to be efficient?
Okay, why are you asking that question? Why do you say?
Well, because when people in power have easy means to affect change, things can go.
Well, that's why
sideways.
I think they should be only involved in certain things. Yeah, and it's expanded to be involved in too many things. So, like the last thing, and we won't go down this rabbit hole now, but like the last thing I want is the government running my healthcare system.
Okay,
talking about a waste of money and inefficiency. That is the last thing I want.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not in for government running healthcare systems, but I think that if there's ways that government can help provide access to healthcare, that's a different situation. I think that I think whenever you privatize healthcare, I think that you put it in a situation for people to have the best healthcare possible. But I do want to say just really briefly, in this positioning, it was so interesting. Because I thought that they were going to break for a vote. That was what Matthew Gaetz initially said that he wanted, to break until Monday. They put the vote on the floor. It's denied, and then all of a sudden a vote takes place, and he then caves in and he votes present, which allowed him to become speaker. So it was interesting. I hadn't seen those elements, and I think that those things are so key. Now, the thing that I was going to say that I thought was really interesting.
Where does this guy's sex trafficking case stand, out of curiosity? So Matt Gaetz.
Oh.
His
my
friend
God.
was arrested for sex trafficking. He was supposed to be,
and because he had been seen with some of these
minor
young girls.
women. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll have to follow up that. Maybe that's what he wanted. He wanted to be exonerated. Unless it's a part of the deal, I'm not doing it. But you're right. And so I looked at that, and then there was another congressman. Where is he from? Florida. That lied about his education, lied about.
He's in New York, isn't he?
No, he's New York.
Yeah.
New York.
Yeah.
And so it was just interesting. What I loved was, and we never get a chance to see this, the access that C-SPAN was granted to be able just to cover this thing, not just your normal government shots, but being on the floor and seeing Alexandria Cortez with the gentleman who had posted the video of her being decapitated. We would think, because these things happen, that these people are, staunch enemies, and they were sitting there chopping it up. And I think that as American citizens, that we should be able to see what our elected officials are doing. What do you guys think about having full access? John, I think I kind of understand where you're coming from as a reporter, but what do you think about having that full unfettered access by the people to be able to see what our officials are doing?
I think if they control what we see, it's worse for us. I'm of the opinion that 9 times out of 10, when two politicians get on the floor and start yelling at each other and screaming and pointing fingers and they go back and they have cigars and champagne in the back room, and
it's political theater.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
It's political theater. And so, when I look at I'm just like, we need to be able to see this stuff, like what's real and what's not real. Like, if you're going to be impassioned about what you do, Matt, are you going to go and have martinis? They're all celebrating the moment the vote is passed and everything is okay. But I just thought that it was very interesting that we got a chance to see that in a way that we never have before. And
they show, again, I'm not a big fan of politics, but I thought C-SPAN, they've done filming when people are like filibustering, and but
the government has always been in control of those shots. This particular time, they allowed C-SPAN the freedom to kind of capture what they wanted, and so that's why we were able to catch them zooming in and reading lips. I do pretty good with reading lips, so when they were saying that, I was like, this is pretty cool. So I hope for our nation, I think my personal thought is, if it's a meeting that you can walk off the street and you can go to DC and you can sit in these meetings or wherever they are, that you should be able to have access with cameras, so that the majority of America has the ability to see, and it gives a written record or a video record of where people were, what they did, and how things happened. So that is just my 2 cents. But I do want to turn the page, because this is going to be interesting. Biden confidential documents. Now they found confidential documents in a locked closet. Was it in his home, John? President Biden's home?
I think it was in a property that belonged to him. That's all I have heard.
Okay.
So
locked in a closet. And so I'm sitting like, now investigations are going. So, before Congress took place, when we win, back the House, we're going to start these investigations. This goes back to what you were saying, Mark. Is there a place that we begin to govern for the people, or is it always going to be this political theater? Is it always going to be just petty politics forever? What is the deal here? And are you guys even interested in this stuff?
To some degree, because I do think an effective government is long-term is important.
Okay.
And I the way I tend to look at these things is things go in cycles. It's a little bit, that right now this is how politics are done, unfortunately, but at some point it'll wear too thin, and people will begin to congregate around someone that does politics differently, more aspirationally, more about trying to build bridges, and then so we'll see a turn of it. I tend to think these sorts of things come and go, and while you're in the middle of it, people think it's never going to end, but it does.
It's never got to
because people just are going to get so tired of it, and someone of note with the right skills, capability, and charisma will step forward to begin to do politics differently, is what I believe.
Well, I think one of the things is, I'm going to tell you what interests me about this is because, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. However, and this is where I go to one end of the other end of the spectrum. I have always thought it interesting, and have always been intrigued by Hunter Biden's role in what was happening in, Ukraine and China, his role in these things. Because whenever people who are just like everyday people, their parents are elected, then all of a sudden you get off. I'm always concerned or interested in seeing, like, what was the real situation. And because he became president, there was a lot that just kind of disappeared in the process. And I'm just wondering if there's any leverage or any real issue, if there's a real there as it relates to the situation with Hunter Biden. And I say that because his computer, his laptop was found, I guess, with some questionable things on it. But then also, whenever you have someone that is in a position and there are issues that are underlining, like he had a substance abuse issue.
I mean, there's something shady here. Just how shady is the question?
That's my question.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, here's clearly a guy making a lot of money off who his dad is.
Absolutely. Well, no question about it.
Making kind of money in roles he should never have. Who knows? In the middle of all sorts of personal issues. Who knows? Ultimately, who knows? And while I don't love it, I get why people on the other side are. This is such a singular issue.
Yeah, but
because
but it makes sense. People, we have to know these things.
Yep.
We have to know if people are receiving benefits because of their relationship to our political leaders, because that compromises who our leadership is.
And what are they doing with that,
Absolutely.
with that access?
What did they promise? What did they promise?
And what did they potentially provide?
And so for many people, these things may not be interesting, but for me, I think that these things are necessary. I think that for so many years, there hasn't been any oversight as it relates to the perks and the benefit of family members. And so now we have to be a bit more intelligent in how we handle those things. And I'm glad that we're looking into those things. I don't think that we should spend our entire cycle in office doing it, but I definitely see the benefit for those things happening. John, were you going to say something in regards to that?
Oh, I just think that both sides think they have a smoking gun on the other,
Right.
and ultimately, I don't think anything's really no one's going to get punished, but information will continue to come up as long as it is politically beneficial.
Well, that's the difference between being a regular citizen and a politician, I guess. But I wanted to share just briefly for those of you who are listening. It will be Sunday evening when this airs. I wanted to share briefly. There is an event that's taking place, a youth-led march and rally, stand up, speak out against gun violence here in the city of Saginaw. January 16th, that's MLK Day. For most people, they have that day off. And so these students who are 15 and 16-year-old students, they're 10th graders, have decided to stand up. They had a friend who was recently shot at a gas station in a car. And so they've become impassioned to share their voice and to let the community know, hey, we got to do something about this nonsensical gun violence. We've got to make a change. There are political officials that will be a part of this. This will be their opportunity to speak truth to power. I'm so excited about it. Mark here sitting next to me has become a sponsor of this great event all the way in Midland, making change in Saginaw.
Saginaw, baby.
It's a great place to be. We want to thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to come back, and before we get into today's conversation, I want us to finish those key steps on how to have courageous conversations around race. We'll do that when we come back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
Hello, this is Kareem, and we're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. We're here in the studio with the guys, and we're having this conversation. We're coming back. I want to pick up. We were talking on last week, at the end of last week's show, and we never get through this because Mark usually leads us through down a rabbit hole somewhere. We get caught in a tangent.
You're the host, man. Take charge.
I know, but I enjoy it. I think that if we're gonna have conversation, we should have fun while we do it, and we hope that you guys are enjoying it. You know, from what we're getting for feedback, you guys are enjoying the conversation. But we were talking about something that was really important. I want to make sure that we get those last details in. We were talking about tips for having courageous conversations on race. But before we do that, I want to ask my guys in the studio, have you guys taken the opportunity to set up and to challenge those around you to have courageous conversations on race? We've been talking about it, but have we had the opportunity to do so?
My social circle is not that large, but
me and my friend.
Exactly.
And my dog.
Not really. I haven't sat down and really talked with anybody in a serious enough context to bring something like that up.
When do you have time to get out of here? Are we gonna have to talk to the powers that be to allow you to have some social time to do something?
No, we're fine. Everything's fine.
As
That's
I
what my
always
contract
used to say,
says.
Jonathan owns his time. He has the final call. You can work as many hours as you want.
Absolutely.
But we know, Mark,
Yeah.
You have one instance, both instances, I think I kind of was there. But the one instance, the summer event that you did, I think that was an amazing portrayal.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. No. I think about that. I'm like, we need to do
more of those.
More of those things. And Mark, just kind of give really quickly a recap of what you did.
Well, I had a cookout, as I call it, at my house this summer.
Mark had a cookout, not a barbecue,
not
but
a barbecue, a cookout. And I invited
Mark, that's cultural appropriation.
Is it?
Cultural appreciation.
Appreciation.
A diverse segment of the population. There were 5 black people,
black folks,
including 1 small child, 6 white folks, including 2 small children, and 2 Hispanic people.
Yeah. And they were, it was South American?
Colombian.
All right. So what I thought was interesting, and now that you bring that up, those dynamics, what I thought was so interesting was the dynamic between the kids, and how, the adults were there.
There's no concept of race.
Absolutely. None. The kids were just like, oh, kids, a new play friend. And they went off and they were playing in the corners and all around the house. We were trying to figure out where they were. They had absolutely no concept of race. It meant absolutely nothing to them, which let me know that when we have these, these huge issues, these are because we've allowed ourselves to have these things forced upon us. We've been taught these things. And it's really sad that when you can see the beauty of just that, pure relationship between these kids of different races and how they were getting along, and then you see the friction that occurs in other places. I wish we could have much more like a childlike approach to these types of things. However, Mark, I want to say kudos once again. I want to challenge more people. If you're listening to this, and it wasn't anything that was
remember the fashion show? That was another
example.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. No, now talk about this. Mark didn't only have a cookout. He had a cookout because that's usually what black folks have, and you get you either get invited to the cookout or not.
You're on the list or you're not.
Yeah, Mark is on the list. Well, Mark not only had a cookout, but he also had an event, a fashion show, the Taeyeon collection with Monty Holland. And it was a very diverse group of individuals. Mark, you intentionally
that was the plan, because again, I think we've talked about it briefly, Kareem. One of the things I've noticed about Saginaw County is, like, I go to a lot of events that as the CEO of Hemlock, would naturally get invited to, and it was the same group of people at all the events. And I won't go through the names, but they looked a lot like me.
The usual suspects.
The usual good people, all trying to make a difference, but it's the usual suspects. And then I would go to occasionally at some other event, like an NAACP event or something maybe with you, and it's this whole other group of leaders in Saginaw County. It was like it's almost like a segregated leadership circles that don't actually interact with each other.
Which is really interesting, Mark, because as long as you have been the CEO, I can't believe that we hadn't run into each other knowing so many of the same people. I think
But you
some
don't
places
get invited to like the
I
same
may get
events.
invited. I just don't go. I just don't
And
go.
so the idea of the event was I was going to throw this fashion show and invite leaders from those two circles.
Absolutely.
The idea, and it never kind of came to fruition, but was to have a series of these, maybe once, twice a year, so that, yeah, again, and the premise was, hey, if you just get to know these people, you'll develop relationships naturally, and together you'll bridge across the two different communities.
And I'm extremely excited about that. And Mark, that sparked other things with the Saginaw Film Festival that we're looking to do, and bringing in Mr. Koleth as a part of that conversation and tying it to some things that are happening in Juneteenth. If you're going to do this, you've got to be intentional. And I think that, Mark, I think that you're showing people, and if there's anybody out there listening, if you're looking for someone to speak on how to bring communities together, if you're looking for someone to talk and have conversations about how we can overcome those historical boundaries of race, the guy sitting to my right is probably a great person to do so. And I'm not just saying that because he is a friend. He became a friend because I saw where his heart was, and he put his heart and his time and his energy in those spaces. And I think that we need to have people that are really challenging us to do those types of things. And so, Mark, kudos to that. But we were talking about some things, some tips to have these courageous conversations. And we started, and I think that we all kind of, it's got to start with respect. We want to start with respect, and then attempting to put aside our preconceptions. What are we talking about when we say that, though, John?
Well, I think that anybody walking into a conversation has a prejudgment of who they're sitting across from. They have an idea, an image in their head. Like the first time that we sat down and talked, I sat down across from you.
What were you thinking? We never talked about this.
I said it out loud. We sat down. We knew I was going to be producing the show, and I said, I don't think we're going to agree on a lot of things.
You did,
and
say
you
that.
said, well, why? And I kind of explained, well, I don't I can't imagine that we come from very similar backgrounds, and it turns out we have a lot in common. Which that's what that means. It's set that aside, figure out who you're talking to before you make that judgment, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is when you first came in, because I had a Black producer starting out. I had a Black male producer when I first started this program. That didn't work out. And then we moved, and they brought in a young Caucasian guy who was Hispanic. And he was kind of worldly. He had some understanding. And it's not that it didn't work out. It's just that his situation and his timing here changed. And so they said, hey, we got this new guy, Jonathan. We think he's going to be great. I'm like, they sent me Opie Taylor. Like in my mind, I'm thinking like, this kid is coming from Mayberry. Like, what is he like? Okay. But as we were talking, and I said, I'll give it a chance. And as we were talking, I was like, I kind of like him, and I like the tension that you brought and how you were thinking. And then I was like, you know what? I really would love to have another perspective other than just, you and I talking in it. And so as Mark and I began to develop that relationship, and he and I probably had most people would consider like they're never going to talk ever again in terms of how we initially connected and the conversations that we had. But Mark was really like, I'm not offended. And so that forged a great relationship. So you really got to get rid of those preconceptions, examine your motivation. And Mark, that's what I said to you when we first met.
Yep.
Why do you want to be here?
Yep.
What's your purpose? Why do you want to be involved in the community, the Black community?
It's also, just to build on that, is like, don't get personally offended. Assume like the person is not trying to offend you somehow. And so don't do that, because they're probably not. They're probably not trying to offend you.
And, sometimes I've been with my folks and, my people, I'm down for my people, but sometimes, we can have those moments and they'll be like, oh, that was racist. I'm like, stop it. Like not today. That wasn't even racist. Like, stop, get your feelings off your shoulder, listen to what they said, understanding that was not the intention, and let's move on from there. So I don't let people just kind of throw that out there with me. There has to be some real evidence of something going on before we allow that to happen. John, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. All right.
You're absolutely right.
Embrace your discomfort in not knowing. We talked about that. It's okay to not know. As a matter of fact, I would prefer people to just ask instead of assuming or to make up something. Let's just ask those questions, because the process is all about getting a better understanding, and then accept the realities as they were. The past is what it was. I don't, John is not responsible for everything that slavery bought and slaves coming over here. It's not the case. But we're here to get a better understanding on how we can move things forward as we progress. Research and relearn. There's a lot of things that we have learned as individuals that is not correct. We've got to research, get some information, and relearn. And one of the things I want to say is, don't always look for people of color to have the answer. Do a little research, come to the table, having equipped yourself with some understanding, and then you can find out how you can be an ally in terms of what we're doing. Listen and be open to questions, internalize what you learn, and last, commit yourself to change. And that is a lifetime perspective. I am committed to becoming the best person that I am. That means I am challenging myself to always learn about other cultures and ethnicities, and how we can be enlightened and empowered by that information that we learn. So I wanted to make sure we gave you those things.
Mind if I add one more?
Absolutely.
I'd also suggest, again, as you go into discussions, is seek where you have commonality and try to build on that commonality, because that's how relationships are built. And I think if you sat down with 10 people and you really worked at it, you'd find out you have more things in common, more common beliefs than you have things that you have different, frankly.
I think you'd be surprised for sure.
Yeah.
I think you'd be surprised for sure. So we're going to turn the corner and we're going to get to our conversation for today, which I'm excited about talking about mentorship, because that has been a great avenue for how my life has been shaped and been formed. So we're just going to talk a real quick question. Is mentorship important to you? John, do you have mentors? You're a young guy. Do you have a mentor?
Not I've read through kind of your outline here and your thought process on what a mentor is, and not as officially as all that.
Okay,
so I don't know that mentors are ever quote unquote official.
Yeah.
It's a
So
relationship
what do you mean?
almost.
So what do you mean?
I've had people that I have people that continue to contribute to kind of my development professionally and personally. But I do not consider any of them a mentor.
Why not?
I think that's
Right.
What makes a mentor for you that they're not a mentor, out of curiosity?
What are they not doing, John? We need to get this right.
They're not telling me what I do wrong.
That's important.
That's something that I have a huge problem with, and it bothers me.
Most people are afraid to tell people what they're not doing well, and that's where a true mentor
exactly
comes. Yeah.
Okay. So these are relationships. Are these just relationships that you kind of forge through work?
Mostly, yeah.
Okay. So do you have anyone that's in your orbit that you see doing what you desire to do, or have an interest in doing, or currently responsible for doing, that does it at a high level, or does it, efficiently?
Not currently in my circle. No. What I want to do is kind of one of those, you got to go to Metro Detroit, you got to go to Chicago, you got to go somewhere else to be doing the high-end audio engineering that I would like to be doing.
Okay.
But I'm learning a lot in my position.
We know people, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
You might in this field. I don't know anybody in this field.
No, I do, honestly, in production. And so, if that's something that interests you, I'm a firm believer that if you find someone that is doing what you desire to do, it makes the job and the task of learning, like, it cuts it in half. So I'm a big proponent on mentorship. So if there's things we might need to have that conversation off air, what is it exactly? And, we might be able to partner you with some people.
Could be.
Yeah. So let's make that happen.
I think any successful person's probably had numerous mentors through the course of their career and life personally.
So Mark, I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to ask you, being a person who has, experienced success, what do you think is generally, because there's a lot of people that want mentors, but think, they're going to be too busy, or they won't have time. Generally, people who are successful, what do you think that they think in terms of this whole thing called mentorship?
I think most of them think it's very important. I mean, like big companies almost always have mentorship. They talk about mentorship. Some of them have formal programs. I don't think you can formalize it too much. I think it's something that happens naturally, because it's ultimately really effective. Mentor-mentee relationships are, in essence, a personal bond. It's a older friend, younger friend, father, son, whatever you want to kind of it's a relationship that develops kind of naturally. And so, these formal programs where they try to match people up and go like, well, this is your mentor now. I've never seen
I
them
ain't buying into it.
Yeah, I've just never seen those be effective. But I think almost anybody, any of note, will tell you that they had mentors throughout their career.
I had one of my mentors share something. Lisa Ray, who's out there, said, "Right, mentors should not be afraid to correct." And
to me, that's one of their biggest jobs.
Absolutely. And it's steering, correction, giving insight on how we can do those things better. Yep. And someone that was my mentor said to me, Kareem, the only thing that I have to give you is information. And I was like, wow. And then they were like, but the thing about that is that information and how to implement it is one of the greatest forms of currency. And when they said that to me, it stuck in my head. Like, we often seek positions to get, a paycheck or whatever. But when we get information and then we are trained by those who master that type of information on how to utilize it, it's one of the greatest benefits that we have in our lives. And so, Mark, where did you find, or how did you obtain your first mentor? If someone's saying, look, I need a mentor,
Yep.
I don't have one, I don't know where to look. How did you find your first mentor?
I mean, it just happened. My first, what I would say, real mentor was I'm just, thinking, was a boss early in my career when I was in R&D. And I was, for whatever reason, I've always sought to have a relationship with my boss above and beyond just a boss. And this guy clearly had, and I wanted to work for him. So I actually went and kind of lobbied to go work for this guy because when I did work for him in another group, he always took a personal interest and went out of his way to spend more time with me, to tell me how to do things, with the data and think about some technical things. And so I sought him out and then sought to develop a deeper relationship. So I was always going to his office to talk about, at first, kind of technical things,
right,
and then later kind of more softer skills.
So is he still around?
Yes, he's still around. The guy's name is Brian Keene, and still have a relationship with him to this day. Spoke with him earlier this week, actually.
Do you think, has that relationship waned, or that time you spent with him waned, or has it transitioned with your
transitioned?
Okay.
I mean, we're still, my thing is I like to maintain relationships.
I'm big on relationships.
They're very important to me. And what's interesting to me is most people don't, once they're not in the same galaxy anymore or the same solar system, most people don't work to maintain them. I actually work to maintain these relationships. But I would say it's evolved. It's different. Obviously, we're not working together. I'm not a really junior person. He's a really senior person, and he's still, it's like a father. No matter how old your kid is, you're still the father, and he's always occasionally still giving me advice on things. So.
I was working when I first started working with the NBA. I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. Honestly, I had gone to school for something completely different, spent time working in a different area. And so coming into the NBA, it was interesting. I remember the first person that I met, I was like, oh, this guy's going to be a great mentor. He was an NBA. I'm not going to say this. He's no longer with us. He was an NBA, agent. And I'm thinking like, oh, this guy's going to be great. He's young, he's vibrant. We're going to make this happen. Turned out to be a total jerk. He's no longer with us. There was an accident that took him out probably about maybe 5 years ago. But he was probably one of the top agents in the game. And so I didn't get along with him, but he had someone that worked in his office under him, and her name was Cindy LG. And so, Cindy, if there's some weird, freaky way that you might hear this, because I know that you are in the Chicago area, I want to say thank you for your input and everything, all of your advice. When I was coming in, Mark, she said something to me, and it's crazy because it's like 20 years from the time that I was coming in until like the reality of what she said actually set in. She said, you probably think that what you're getting ready to do is really exciting, and it is fun. She says, but I'm going to tell you, I've got to find my way out of here. I was like, why? This is amazing. The travel, you get to meet all the top players,
access to people.
Yeah. This is amazing.
Glamour.
She was like, working in this industry will wear you down, babysitting spoiled rich kids. And I was like, she doesn't get it. Oh, she's been here too long. And she retired 2 years after that and went on to do something different. And probably year 15, I was thinking to myself, I don't want to do this forever. Year 16, I'm like, I can't do this forever. Year 17, like, I'm not going to do this forever. And then I began to understand it. And so I started reaching out to her, like, what were the things that you did in your transition? And even though she wasn't a consistent force in my life, she was willing to share with me, hey, you got to make sure you do X, Y, Z, do this, put this away, plan here. And so it really made for a seamless transition when I was looking to do something different. And so what I realized in that moment is that I had so many mentors that prepared me for that moment, but then I had so many other mentors that while I was in it, they were teaching me, this is how you, do your brand strategy. This is how you build a brand. And so I thought, we have different mentors for different things and different phases of our life. Mark, how many mentors would you say that you've had during the course of your life?
I would say professionally. And the issue is, for me, professional and personal, there is no wall. So they blend together. Okay. So they had a personal impact as well. I'd say I had 3. I'd say, Brian taught me a lot about one side of the business. There was another guy that taught me a lot about another side of the business. And then there was another guy that I think taught me a lot about leadership. And then from that kind of leadership thing really spawned this kind of real passion around creating a certain type of culture in the business.
Wow. Go ahead, John.
I want to amend my statement that I haven't ever had a mentor, because in the course of this conversation, I remember.
Now he's realizing
I'm insulted by that.
Well, no, the person that has been the biggest mentor to me, and we no longer work together, which it stinks. It really hurt when I found out that he wasn't going to be working with us anymore. Joey Batano, the former play-by-play analyst for the Saginaw Spirit, which is a weird thing to say, but when I first got into, like, my first live broadcast was with the Saginaw Spirit, and he was there correcting. It was a correction. It wasn't a, hey, you did this wrong. It was a correction. It was, nope, this is how you want to phrase this. This is how you want to do this. You want to time this out better. He walked me through that, guided me through it, and he was an amazing mentor and coworker. And
what's his name again?
Joey Batano.
There you go, Joey Batano.
Yep. He's probably not.
Is he out here? Is he still in the area?
No, he moved out of state.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Well, for
maybe
me,
you could call him up and look for a gig there.
That's what you've been waiting for. Thank you, WSGW. No, but no, the greatest mentor that I've ever had, and I know that our time our time flies when we're together. It was somebody that I never worked with. It was somebody that has never, been in a professional capacity with me. But it was my uncle. And it's funny because we grew up so much. He's probably about 5 or 6 years older than me. But he said something to me probably about 15, 16 years ago. And this is when I was, doing a lot of what I considered great things. 2010, I think 2008, I'd worked with President Obama doing a partnership, traveling the country with his team. And he came to me, he said, you are the biggest underachiever I have ever met in my life. And I'm like going, wow. But he challenged me to tap into untapped potential. Sometimes we can do things very well and we will rest in that area. But a really good mentor is not going to allow you just to do what you do well, but he's going to challenge you in the areas where he sees your growth is stagnant. And he's going to cause you to grow beyond your ability and soar like you've never thought you could. I am so glad, Mark, you're not a mentor, you're a friend, but I learn a lot from you in these conversations every single day. And so we want to give a shout out to those mentors. I want you guys to give their names one more time.
Joey Batano.
Joey Batano.
Brian Keene, Pat Gottschalk, and Corey Walker.
Wow. And I'm going to say shout out to Brian Bowen, the late, great Bishop Marvin C. Pryor, and the current Bishop of the International Churches of God in Christ, John Drew Sheard. He is now running the entire thing, but he's always been a mentor and a friend. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in. Come back next week with more conversations on race in America with United Shades of Gray.